Final one, Ole Miss versus Georgia. That's where we're at. Let's dive in to Ole Miss in Georgia for the final college football preview, the All-State Sugar Bowl. This one's in New Orleans. Ole Miss continues the ride without Lane Kiffin. I mean, they looked okay against Tulane. They looked all right. But on the flip side, we continue to talk about that SEC championship when we talk about Alabama. Georgia had a heyday with Alabama in the SEC championship game. Can they continue that ride against another SEC foe in Ole Miss, who is trying to still find their identity? Chambliss is interesting, though. He's an interesting quarterback. Who wins this game, Georgia or Ole Miss? Let's start right from the beginning. Let's go prediction right away.
Prediction right away. I'm kind of leaning Ole Miss. There's something about this team, and you just said that the Alabama-Indiana game is the most intriguing to you. This game, to me, is the one I'm most excited about this weekend. Okay. I don't know. It just feels a lot more 50-50. Like, Texas Tech, I think, has a real shot, honestly, against Oregon. I think that they're probably the better team. That doesn't mean that necessarily they'll win. I think if you break down Alabama, Indiana, everything points towards Indiana. And we did our preview of Miami, Ohio State. You'll have to give that a watch if you haven't already on the channel. But this game, to me, feels very much like it could go either way. The spread is 6.5 in the favor of Georgia. I honestly think Ole Miss covers that. I think that this ends up being a pretty close game. But obviously it could be a late touchdown to push it to 7 or whatever. That would result in Georgia covering. I am going to lean Ole Miss here. I think it ends up being one of those who has the ball last, who makes the most of their early possessions type of games. But I like what Chambliss is about. I like how this team kind of fought back. Obviously, it was only against Tulane, but with no Lane Kiffin, if you will, they feels like they're very much together in this, playing for each other as opposed to playing for like a head coach or whatever. They're playing for, Lacey's playing for Chambliss, who's playing for Wallace. Like, they're playing for each other out there on the field, which is a very powerful force. And I think it might be enough in this one to get Ole Miss to the next round.
Ole Miss was leading the game. They've played this game before, but they played in Athens. Let's remember this. Georgia did win this game 43-35, but Ole Miss was leading heading into the fourth quarter. And then Georgia took over. And you can say that was home field heroics. You can say whatever it was, but they scored 17 points in that fourth quarter. They were down 35-26 heading into the final frame. They wound up winning this game 43-36. Gunnar Stockton was great in that game. If you remember, if you just go back and if you want to be a box score warrior, I mean, this is the game to pay attention to. Gunnar Stockton had 4 touchdowns, 289, was 26 for 31. He was near perfect in that football game. Also rushed for a touchdown, 60 yards on the ground as well. He was very, very good. Georgia had a ton of yards against this defense. 510 total yards against Ole Miss. And again, a lot of that happened in the fourth quarter. I wonder how much that comes into play, knowing that this isn't in Athens anymore. This is in New Orleans. This is a neutral site game. And this is really, truly a neutral site game. I think you're going to get a true mix, a true 50-50 mix of who's in the stadium between Ole Miss fans and Georgia fans. I don't think there's any home field advantage at all for the Bulldogs.
I do think there is a very true token of truth, I suppose, about, Ole Miss crumbling late. Like, I don't think of all of the points you've brought up today so far, this one is the one that reigns most true to me. I really do think that there is something to be said, and this is just a vibes assessment. This is kind of my thing here. Ole Miss feels like that flash in the pan, like, we'll get you early. If we knock you off your feet, we're going to dominate this game team. And Georgia feels like the much more consistent, might get us a little bit early, but we're going to fight through this game. And kind of like a Derrick Henry, right? Like, Derrick Henry might average 1 to 2 yards a carry in the first quarter, but he's probably averaging something closer to 8 or 9 yards a carry in the fourth. He's just going to keep on trucking, carry after carry after carry, and it'll get to you. Georgia really does feel like they can just stay in this game. As long as they don't get down by 30 points, they're going to find a way to strike, and Gunnar Stockton's going to throw some pass, and it's going to be some crazy highlight, and they're going to win this game. When it comes down to full game assessment, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, I actually think there's a very real chance that Georgia wins this fourth quarter. As far as the neutral site, I could see that being a small factor here. But I think both these teams are professionals. I just don't think it's going to have a major impact. Like, it is going to be a true neutral site game. We're not playing, in Georgia, even though it's a neutral site game. Like, this is going to be legit. I think Ole Miss has a very real shot, but they probably have to kind of hit Georgia hard enough to knock them off their feet entirely.
You found a way to piss off both Ole Miss and Georgia in one sentence, and is not by accidentally calling them Oregon. It was by talking about an Alabama running back in Derrick Henry. That was how you did it. I mean, insane. In a preview, you bring up Alabama somehow with two SEC schools that are not Alabama. Look, I think the fact that this is at a neutral site is going to mean a lot more than the fact that it's not. You're talking about not having 93,000 strong in Athens at Sanford Stadium. You're having about, maybe if you're lucky, 35, 40,000 Georgia fans, and you have to compete against Ole Miss fans. I do think this is going to be truly maybe a 50-50 kind of mix. Maybe Georgia takes a little bit of an advantage, maybe. But I mean, like, geographically, these fans both travel very well too. Like, I would not be surprised if this was like a true 50-50 mix of fans in this game for sure. You know, Trinidad Chambliss is so interesting to me. I think his path to the SEC, being from Ferris State, obviously a D2 kind of quarterback going to the SEC, and obviously what he's done over this season has been so interesting. He didn't have his best game against Georgia. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't his best game. But when you look at the rest of the stats, this is one thing that certainly interests me. This is a game that obviously Georgia came back in. They scored 17 straight. You would think that they would have all these mistakes, right? Ole Miss would have all these mistakes, and why Georgia came back, not a single turnover was in this game. And Georgia wins by one single possession. Is it that simple, Nick? Is it that simple that when it's all said and done, the winner of the turnover battle wins this football game?
Actually, yes, obviously turnovers are going to be huge in this one. The game, or the stat that I was looking at, I think is going to be very important here, is how does Ole Miss's run defense look, and how do they handle early downs? If they allow Georgia to stay on track, on schedule, if you will, get into second and third and shorts, I think they're going to struggle. And historically this season, they've ranked about 108th in early downs EPA per play. So, I think that's going to be a big factor in this one. If they don't force Georgia to have to convert on some third and longs, I think that Georgia's not going to have a problem. Like I was just talking about them chugging along throughout this game. If they can chug along and keep these drives sustained, you talk about time of possession and whether it's like a meaningful stat or not. I do think that if Georgia stays on track and time of possession becomes a factor in this one, they'll have the upper hand because they're going to heat up as they get into this game. That's at least how I see this going. I obviously turnovers are massive, and I'd love to see some of like the major data stats on turnover differentials in games and how impactful they are in playoffs versus regular season and this, that, and the other, because I know they're huge. But I am leaning towards, because I have trust in Ole Miss's offense. I am leaning towards, can their defense keep Georgia at bay? Because I don't know if Ole Miss is capable of being perfect and winning every offensive possession. And that's what it's going to need to be if their defense can't keep up with Georgia.
Here's a fun one to wrap up this conversation here. If Ole Miss beats Georgia, obviously they took down Tulane, but this is a different beast. If they beat Georgia without Lane Kiffin, what does that do to his legacy as he takes on LSU?
Well, I mean, it looks good for his recruiting, doesn't it? I mean, it shows that he can get the right players in the building. If that's that way. That's the way I look at it. Obviously, it doesn't look good to win without their head coach, but I would first look at the team building, the roster, and what they were able to accomplish. But yeah, I think the general population is going to say, well, why do we even have Lane Kiffin then? I think it's pretty clear that whoever we put in to coach the team that he puts together, they can really accomplish anything.
So are you trying to say that if Ole Miss wins this game, there's a potential Lane Kiffin overrated trend that could happen on social media?
Oh, on social media, 100%. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's necessarily like fair. I don't know if I would be in that camp, but social media, yeah, you'll definitely hear it. It will be very loud.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that one.